media history and writing culture. Basically, again, we have the progress from oral culture, which we had last class, and how people start to realize, okay, the material and the content of our history and of our important material is all in our heads, but there could be a lot of problems. Like, what if someone dies? What if someone started to get some, memory problems? What if they don't have good language skills? How can we protect this information? So we're going to unfold some of these ideas today and how they reached this conclusion of how exactly can we work on recording our material. So talking about narratives of media history. Now we talk about a few things such as how media operate today, again, the progression of writing culture until all the way till today, media history and how they're presented, again, how it basically helped in all of the technological invention that we have today. How can we understand the scope of, again, the historical events that really shaped media? And of course, the categories of viewing historical events. So the first half of today's class will be so I think there are 2 readings for today's class. I think I've uploaded them. The first half will be so we have two short readings. Narratives of Media History, reading in your porter, and which will be basically an introduction to oral, writing, print, and electronic culture. Of course, with different shapes of media coming, different organizations and cultures emerge and coming together. So for example, when we talked last time about how when Gutenberg invented the printing press, it changed a whole era in Europe. It changed them from the Dark Ages to the Middle Ages, in which there were more reading, and then there was, of course, the Enlightenment era. However, there's also another way or other ways of thinking about, the history of media, or how the progression of media. And again, we're trying to understand the ways we can look at history and look at historical events that shape media. For example, what's happening nowadays in the United States, the Black Lives Matter protests, I'm pretty sure maybe 10 years later, people are going to look at it as a huge historical event that is going to change things in the United States. So we have 4 definitions of understanding the changing of history. Now, first of all, we have historical events. It's the shortest unit of historical time is just an event, okay? So an event is something like a war, a decree, or a meeting. So anything that does change our perception of how we can change ideas. Like, again, the Black Lives Matter protest, it's an event that is happening that will change people's looks on, for example, police brutality, or how Black people have been treated in the United States, and so on. So the picture here that we have is an event from 1963. It was a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., I Have a Dream. Basically, it was a call to try and end racism in the United States. So that was an event that was also broadcasted on television, and people were very interested to understand, again, how does it change the look of racism in the United States. The second level, the second understanding of history is level of conjuncture. Basically, it describes short period of times, so it's bigger than events, but it's measured in decades. So a decade is like 10 years. So conjunction could have many events, like the United States post-war years that happened from 1945 to 1960s, and a lot of things that happen in between. Another example of level of conjuncture is, for example, the Great Depression, which is a huge economic drop in the United States, and so on. All right, what we have next? And then we have the historical era. Now, era is, again, is seen as a period as a whole. So again, I'm pretty sure you have heard about it in maybe history classes or English classes, like the industrial era or the Enlightenment era. It could take up to hundreds of years. And finally, we have an historical epoch. So basically, a historical epoch it represents a shift. So it represents this major significant transformation of the human life that really, again, transition that affects a lot of individuals, different culture. Um, so for example, the transition from Middle Ages to the modern period, or the transition from Dark Age to the Enlightenment era. So basically what we want to understand here is, how did that shift happen? How did media help in creating this shift? Which is again something that we are hopefully going to understand. Basically these four um, terms will most probably come to you as a definition or a multiple choice question, as again as a way of understanding what other levels of historical events do we have. All right, so what are these exactly historical narratives? So in the next few classes, we're going to have 3 narratives that we are going to look at. Now in the first narrative, we are going to look at theories that looks at the transformation from the oral culture to writing to print to communication to writing to print to electronic. So basically what we're asking is, to what extent has the history of communication really shaped basically the directions of human and social life? How do they, how did they work? How did this transformation work? The second narrative focuses on, of course, communication, on culture, and the social relationships in modern life. I think we have spoken about it before, about this social relationships. Think about how we decide we want to text someone or email someone for some piece of information versus looking at them face to face. When people in oral culture were all living together because there was no means of communication, no means of transportation, and then now everyone is scattered all over the world. So different communications really helped in transitioning social relationships in the modern life. And the third narrative basically describes a different transformation from modern to postmodern. Here in this last narrative, communication is seen as a broader cultural transformation in history. So again, there's a lot of things that we can also apply to us, in which how we understand our own psychologies, our own sociology transformation, and so on. For example, when I told you that I would have, for example, number of students who would be very anxious to receive a phone call or to even make a phone call, because the ideas of being put on the spot is not very easy, versus our parents who did not have this luxury. They only had one telephone, which was a landline that they had to use. So it definitely changed our social relationships, our psychology, our look within each other, and so on. Now, some other definitions that we also want to look at is basically, again, understanding communication cultures. So oral cultures, of course, takes place face to face, because think about it. How can I have oral culture when I cannot see you, right? We're using verbal and nonverbal language, and most of the time it has to be face to face. In writing culture, it's a literate society, again, a shared system of inscription. So I'm writing things, or writing exists so that communication could take place outside of face-to-face communication, such as sending letters. Again, years ago when letters were still a thing, or you send a telegram, you write a letter and you send it. So you don't have to physically be face-to-face. Print culture is an expansion of writing culture by the printing press. So again, you write something, you print it, a few copies, and you send it to different people across the world. So not only one person will get it, but more than one individual. And finally, electronic culture, which we have today, it transcends time and space without physically moving the same object. Time and space. So for example, again, you send me an email by 2 a.m. and I see it the next day at 10 a.m. and it's there, it's visible. I can read it and I can reply back to you. So I don't have to wait for a specific time or a specific place to send back the email. Same thing with, for example, uploading your video, uploading this video. We're not in the same space. I'm uploading the recorded material and everyone can watch it on their own time. You don't have to wait for a specific time to watch it. We've already spoken about oral culture, so I'm just giving you to the slides of oral culture, and it has also some detailed, interesting explanation. So it's really tiny, pages 36 and 30. Narratives of Media History is basically, I think it's a 6 or 7 pages, the whole reading, and basically it's a two pages of details about oral culture, and then writing, and then print, and so on. Now, in writing culture, the first thing that we have today, basically, the very first ideas about alphabet was said to come from the Greeks. Again, I'm pretty sure in your history classes or maybe philosophy classes, you have read a little bit about the Roman and Greek Empire, and which they were extremely powerful, they were extremely big, and so on. So the very first ideas of alphabet, again, it was said to come from the Greeks. There was always said that there's a relationship between the development of writing and the rise of cities. So something that I want you to think of and maybe try to answer it by the end of the class. Do you think there is a relationship between development of writing and civilization? Meaning that I have to have writing, or I have to have some recording to be able to have a civilization. Think about it. I want you to keep it in your mind. Maybe it's a bonus question, so you can get something by the end of the class. So think about it and we'll discuss it later on. The Canadian economist Harold Innis, we're going to see Harold Innis a lot in the next few classes. He describes how writing, or the written communication, allows societies to preserve. So again, think about all of the old societies who did not have any recording, right? Just imagine how many societies do you think we have had, but we will never know anything about them because they simply did not have any recording. The question again, do you think we have a relationship between writing and between civilization? I don't want to have any answers from you guys now, so answer it by the end of the class. All right. So now again, imagine we were just saying. So imagine having imagine there was so many civilizations back thousands and thousands of years ago, but again, we will never really know about them because they did not have any way to record their statement. Maybe they carved stones, or they carved on mountains, but because of the weather changing, the rain, climate change, maybe they are lost. So maybe there were a lot of cultures that we will never know about because there was no proof of recording. So Harold Innis says, written communications allow societies to preserve it. You are placing something. Again, think about the Roman Empire or the Greek Empire. How did we know about them? These empires were 500 years ago, maybe even more, but they had durable texts which could be handed down from one generation to the other. They have material that are kept, and so on. The reason that we had something that was protected and preserved hundreds of years ago, maybe even thousands of years, this is when we say we have proof of actually something that happened. So again, a proof of an event, a proof of, a living culture, and so on. Now, within the writing culture, the very interesting thing here about writing culture is how things could change meanings, or could change definition. So one of the things that we look at, what does the word literacy means? So if I asked you this maybe 20 years ago, what does literacy means, or what does literacy means, you will say, oh, illiteracy is someone who is unable to read and write. That was something that's like maybe 20, 15 years ago. Nowadays, the word literacy, it changed a little bit. It has a little bit of a different meaning. Someone says, oh, someone who is illiterate means someone who is not cultural enough, or maybe someone who is technologically illiterate, like they don't do well with technology. So even if we do have writing culture, so even if we do have, recorded documents of things thousands of years ago, some of these meanings might change meanings. Some of the words and the statements, even if, remember when we said in oral culture, we have like abstract representations. So even if it's not abstract, even if we do have an understanding of what they mean, maybe even the words or their phrases could just change. So again, does other word like literacy carry the same meaning which it had 50 years ago? So this is another thing that communication researchers, they always look at, because words, they do change meaning throughout the years. Now, in some of the historical context that we want to look at, there were some, of course, the very first looks of writing. It first developed in a place called Mesopotamia, which is roughly like more or less where Iraq is right now, which is northeast of Asia. No, not northeast of Asia. Yeah, like middle of east of Asia. At about the same time, there's a lot of civilizations that started to develop. In Egypt, in India, and in China, there's a lot of writing and recording. So Egypt, India, and China were really ahead of their time when it came to protecting information or protecting resources. Now, in each of these areas, population was forced into new economic, social, and technological development, which was basically called the Industrial Revolution. They were forced to move on to something that was more advanced, basically. There was even something that's called the Revolution of Human Knowledge. There's more details about it in page 92. Basically, what a revolution of human knowledge is, when you're getting so many information, so many knowledge, and you're trying to apply it in your everyday life. Now, I'm going to share something with you on the whiteboard here. Okay, now I don't have a mouse pad, so please excuse my drawing skills. Now, again, I want you to have an open mind and try to apply things in oral culture. Now, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, where people used to still live in villages and close to each other. Okay, so here is, again, I don't have a mouse pad and I am not Picasso, so please excuse this. So here is, let's say here's the village. Here are some, let me change. Here's some greens. That means that is some trees. We're going to pretend that it's some trees, right? Or like a forest. And on the other side, here's like a lake or a water or something. All right. And in between over here, people are living. So let me just, yeah, there we go. So here's a family. Here's another family. Here's a third family. So lots of families are basically living together inside of the village. They had their own community. So remember when we said in oral cultures, people would have, like people would be dependent on each other. So oral cultures, okay? Whoops. All right, now basically what happens in some place that is interdependent on each other is that someone who is in charge of going to the lake, maybe grabbing to grab clean water. Someone else is also in charge to go to the lake, but this person is in charge of fishing. Other people are in charge to go here to the forest, maybe to hunt animals for food or their leather or their skin, or to gather berries, and they all live together here inside of the culture. Now, when things started to develop a little bit, what is the first thing that happens? Now, I want you to put in mind that people in oral cultures, people in oral cultures are very, very, very collectivistic. Do this. Because there's a lot of interdependence on each other. Now, things started to shift a little bit, and maybe one family, let's pretend it's, maybe this family, they started to move somewhere else. Maybe this family started to move somewhere else. Maybe this family went on the other side, and so on. Now, they found out that people are starting together. Of course, they're increasing in population. So someone is getting married, they're having more kids, they're going to take the kids and travel somewhere else, and there's a lot of change. What happens here is they found out, okay, we need to stay in touch with this, original look over here. What do we do? So we have another family here, another family there, we have another family over here. How can we stay in touch? So basically, they wanted to start developing a method to stay in touch, which is basically writing. They thought if we are traveling for far periods or far length, we need to stay in communicating. What is the best way to stay in communicating? How about we write some letters? How about maybe we send letters through pigeons, when they use it as a communication. Maybe we can try to send information with fire and smoke. So they had to think of different ways to be able to send messages through bigger lengths and bigger periods. Right? So as Raman said, they develop a network. That's pretty much it. So think about it. When they were together in this little village, did they need to develop a network? They probably didn't, because it wasn't all in the same area. But once they started to grow into other places, they would still want to be able to communicate. And this is why we say here, if we go back, this is why we say here the revolution of human knowledge. There was so many knowledge that they had to be able to develop of ways to record it, to keep it, even to send it to other people. Okay, so some other elements that we also look at in the historical context over here is basically, again, there was no language, but what happened is that people wanted to, again, develop some kind of alphabet and develop something that was, easy to recognize among the people. So for example, in ancient Sumer, again, Sumer is somewhere in the past. It's like a tiny place. I think it is close to Bangladesh and China and Pakistan, somewhere in this area. I'm not sure exactly. So they basically wanted to create their own alphabet. So it's regarded, first of all, as the world's first language. Other language, of course, there was some Babylon and Assyrian were written with the Sumerian script. So something that looked like this was a bird. Again, to us right now, I don't think it looks like a bird at all, but to them, they wanted to develop something that was close to a bird. In Egypt, there was the hieroglyphs, again, one of the very first everyday use. So it was easy for everyday people to be able to read and write with the hieroglyphs. So again, something like this represented rain or dew or storm and so on. So what civilizations did back in the past is that they wanted to basically draw something to have it easier for the everyday people. So not only used in government or politicians or administrative work, but something that is accessible to everyone else around us. We have some interesting points over here in the chat room. As Manjinder says, writing is a connection for keeping records, definitely. Government work. With the modernization, people, again, we turn to maybe calls or electronics and so on. Who else? Roman Deep says to keep in contact with our past. Virpal said it's important for civilization because, again, it defined early places and things. And Virpal Kaur, I'm just a question. Virpal Garwal is someone else than Virpal Sidhu, right? Just making sure. To keep the recording of the past is very important, again, because we read, of course, what happened, and not only we get knowledge, but we add this to the present, add this to the future. Amandeep said writing is essential. Of civilized such a development of writing, people become more educated, definitely. Better understanding of the writing content that helps people to document all the facts and don't repeat it in the future. You know what, Amandeep? That's actually one thing that I've been always thinking about. Like, people should be able to learn from their past mistakes. And there's always this term that says history repeats itself, right? But at this very same time, people don't really learn from the past. I mean, we try to say we need to learn from the past mistakes, but it's the same war happening, it's the same economic downfall, it's the same diseases, and I don't think people are really learning from their past. Sukhjit says writing is a long-term record business. Using a writing for taking along records is again important for civilization, easy to understand. Definitely oral records could be forgotten, so writing records keeps this easier. Cambria, the Spanish flu, exactly. Like, if you guys do look at diseases for the past, like there's a huge pandemic that actually happens between every 80 and 100 years, and it feels like no one is really learning from what's happening. So with the Spanish flu in the 1920s, before that 1820s, there was the plague. So every century, some new disease comes up, and no one is really learning from what has been happening. There was some earlier writing systems back in similar that one that we look at. So for example, Kipu was used for administration of a really complex bureaucracy in the Inca Empire. Aboli is a form of encrypted communication. Why was it encrypted? Because again, it was mentioned, it was used for politics or governmental work, so not everyone is able to easily understand it. So continuing on from the discussion of the pictographic system last week, remember early forms of communication with objects and abstract design gave way to less pictographic system, meaning that it made it more complicated to people to understand it. Ideographic system became more prominent in the ancient world, that they saw a lot of increasing numbers of people, especially again within work, politics, and so on. For example, something like bully here, it had no writing actually on the outside, but in the inside it had a number of tokens that represented an idea. An example of bully is this one. It's basically, again, from the outside, we don't know. It's just, a rocket. From the inside, it's a couple of number of tokens that might have representing an idea. Something like maybe they're counting 7 days of the week. Maybe they're counting specific time. Maybe it's used as a watch or as a clock. We're not sure of this exactly. All right, what else? So another question that I want to ask, do you think the system of the tokens over here, this one, or the system of Kupu or bully, do you think the system was understood, or was it used in a pre-state village communities? Now I want you to just put in mind that there's no firm answer for this question. But some of them said that it was used, and some accounted was needed in their trading system. Again, for example, before money was invented, for example, I would give you 2 pounds of tomatoes and you would give me 2 pounds of sugar, for example. Or I would give you, you're gonna give me some fish and I'm gonna cook it and I'm gonna give you some of the things that you cooked. So was that needed? Was that not needed? We were talking right before our break. People, or basically civilization, started to grow, and within the growing scheme, they wanted to make sure that we have some recording. So most of you guys have written in the chat room, or we have spoken about it. We needed to keep some kind of record to make sure our civilization grows. It could be for record keeping, for politics, for the future generation, for our history. There were so many reasons. But one of the main reasons that they really had to start recording was they started to agriculture. They started to farming, right? So for civilization to grow, they needed what we call a very well organized system of agriculture. Remember this interesting, where was it? This interesting Picasso photo that I've just had in the first half? What happened is that people, again, these little villages over here, when they go to the forest to gather material, again, such as fruits or vegetables, and they would eat it and then that's it, and then they would move to another place. But they found out, they said, you know what, let's actually farm our own stuff so we don't have to move a lot. Right? It just made sense that we would stay in one area, farm our own material, farm our own produce, and then maybe sell it, use it, and then, we don't have to move every few months. So for this well-organized system, so you can see here the method for obtaining food started from hunting and then the modern farming. So that, again, modern farming was the most advanced. It was a little bit more complex, but it was just for a smoother and an easier lifestyle. So agriculture became, again, a highly successful way for humans, again, to grow in size, because, again, I don't have to move every few months. I can actually settle in this place. I can farm and I can have animals. I can have my own small farm. Agriculture and recording was really important. They needed to take care of a lot of things. They need to take care of the dates, the timing, the schedule, the organization. Again, dates relevant to growing seasons, the cycle, which each fruit and each vegetable growing, the climate change, animal migration, of course, like something like insects or bugs that would either be helpful for farms or sometimes not very helpful, diseases, and so on. So therefore, again, going back to this one, they moved from hunting and gathering because it was just very not resourceful, to farming and agriculture because it simply kept life more organized and just life more smoother. Let me just grab my charger because it's going to die. Okay. So again, it just made life easier and smoother and overall just a lot more organized in general. Now, some of the earlier forms of writings back in the very early ways of civilization was pictograms and ideograms. Just for you guys, so you won't be very confused, pictographic and pictograms are the exact same thing. Okay, they're the same thing, but pictographic is basically the style of writing. The pictogram is like the noun itself. Okay, so they are the same thing. Don't confuse them as separate things. So we're talking about the style of writing that basically represents things, right? Now pictogram was so easy to understand because it works as a representation, like icons in the semiotic theory. An example of pictogram is this one. You go and a pictogram is, for example, again, I don't have a mouse pad, so something like this. Okay, that's a pictogram, and then another one. Very beautiful and handsome looking girl and a guy, right? And then some pretty hair. that's pretty much on pictogram. It's so similar. It's very easy to resemble what it actually wants to represent. Another one, I'm pretty sure you all did it when you were young. Do you remember drawing the sun like this with like the corner of the page?
Yes.
Did you do it when
Yes.
you were young? Yeah, everyone. I think
Yes.
everyone did it when they were young. They would put the sun in the corner of the page with some sun rays. It was just easy, and it was a way to resemble the sun rays to everything else. So that's pretty much what it means as a pictogram. And so it was used again before alphabet was invented, before we had the English alphabet or the Arabic alphabet or the like Hindu alphabet. There was the pictograph. Pictograph was again very simply, it's a style of drawing or style of writing that was easy to represent things. So it was again, these were a very early form of writing, and they were a direct relationship between the sign. Again, if you go back to semiotics, there was a direct relationship between the sign and what it represents. So they're both really easy together. Now, gradually, people are becoming more and more advanced and more understandable. The writing started to become more evolved, and it became less obvious, and it became more abstract. So again, less obvious, more abstract, which is what we call ideograms. Now, ideograms, again, they're more abstract, but they're still somehow easy to understand. An example of an ideogram is this one. Again, that is supposed to be a circle, sorry. This one and this one. Do you guys know? Now, when these two, I don't want to say sign, but when these two elements were first made, they were not very understandable, which one is which. But by time, people started to understand that one represents male, one represents female. And the thing about them is that they are more abstract symbols, meaning that again, there is limited resemblance to what they actually mean. Like again, and a good example that we had is the clay tokens, which is this one. Do we have a representation of what it means exactly? It could have so many different meanings. It could be, again, it could be days of the week. It could be an exchange of, you gave me 2 kilos of whatever, so I give you this in return to tell you, to know that recorded that I've taken 2 cows or 2 sheep or whatever. So again, it's a more of an abstract symbol. Now, to understand, so there are more other terms. Now, they start to get more and more complicated, but again, it's still easier for everyone to understand. Now, a phonograph, it represents one single sound, usually a syllabus, and that was the very first look of alphabet. So one single sound like A, B, C, D. And that was, again, the very first line of where we want to go when it's the alphabetical order. A logographic is a writing system in which each symbol represents a thought or a meaning, which is similar to this one. Yeah, this one, okay? So take a look here. So I'm not writing an alphabet, I'm not writing a syllabus, but I'm sharing a whole meaning. So flower, it started from, it looked like a starfish basically, but it had a look, and then time by time, look the progress. It started to get more and more abstract. Same thing with elephant. Now, elephant pretty much looks like an elephant when it started, and then by time, they started to use less lines, and it started to just be easier when writing, but a little bit more difficult when you want to look at it and understand it. Big, small, flower, grass, and so on. We had the ideographic before, did we? Yeah. So ideographic is, again, writing that represents ideas. Again, so ideograms is the style is the thing itself. Ideographic is the style. So one of them is the noun, one of them is the adjective. So don't worry about, they're just different words. So again, a phonogram, this is what we have. It pretty much looks like what you guys have in your dictionary. It's a, you look at it and it gives you an idea of how a letter should sound like. And then we have the logogram. I think we have a few more pictures, yeah? Oh, okay. Now, things have started to become more and more advanced. Now, they thought, you know what? The drawing is simply not doing it for us anymore. We want to invent something that is just easier for everyone to understand. So we have the syllabaries and the alphabet. Now, syllabaries are basically writing system that consist of symbols that represent a syllabus. How can I understand a syllabus exactly? The idea that I like to share with my student is, for example, when you want to teach a young child a big word, elephant, you want to teach a 2-year-old or 3-year-old child how to say an elephant. So what you're going to do, you're going to basically cut the word, right? It's to make it easier for this child. So ant. So when you do cut these words, basically that's a syllabus. Now they have, syllabus is usually very easy with, especially with languages that has simple syllabic structures. It could be like English, could be like Japanese, could be like Arabic. So again, syllabus is the syllabaries are cut down of the syllabus. As for alphabet, they are the, again, individual sounds. So again, they decided we need something that was advanced, that would just make things easier in our, again, governmental papers, that will make it easier in our everyday today life, and so on. So each individual sound, it could be again a consonant or a vowel such as A, B, C, D, is represented by one symbol. So again, such as we took back in semiotics, each letter is considered as a symbol. That's, again, they're making alphabets very small, they're easy to learn, they're easy to memorize, because again, so in English we have like 26 letters, in Arabic we have like 27, so they're easy to memorize. So that's pretty much about the alphabet and the syllabaries. They wanted to, because if we want to go back to something like the logogram, imagine having to draw something for each idea that you have. There's so many ideas around us, like if you want to draw a carpet, a book, a person, and it's going to be endless, basically. So doing something that is small and what we call portable means that it's easy for you to carry and easy to memorize. You can take it anywhere with you, and it could be used to transcribe multiple languages very easy, very efficiently. So these are the very first looks of alphabet. So we have the Greek alphabet, and then we have the Phoenician alphabet, and of course both of them are pretty dead languages, but they were one of those first that wanted to make things easier, or to make language easier for people. There's a lot of explanation in pages 99 and pages 100 of the reading. So you can go and take a look and maybe read a little bit. So there are only 2 pages, 99, 100, maybe even like a page and a half. So if you want to go back and take a look at it. Now, what are some of the advantages of the alphabetic media system? Now, first of all, it's very flexible. It's so possible. It's so easy to express huge wide range of ideas, emotions, facts, information, opinions. Like you can even try to mold some of the words and try to send some of the message that you want to send, basically. It's very easy to learn, like we mentioned. Alphabets, most kids now know how to use the alphabets. They're very easy to memorize. Less dependent. Now, what less dependence mean is that you can easily shape it and transform it, and you can easily put it within other words. And when you put it with other words, it gives a completely different meaning. Again, remember signifier and signified back in semiotics, like the word open. So open the door, that gives, the meaning of go open the door, or like open your mind here means that, stay clear, stay focused. So they're very less dependent. You put them anywhere and they easily change format, they easily change looks. And of course, the speed of reading and writing. Again, it's so like, imagine writing a sentence rather than to have to write something using a logogram. So the time and the effort that is used when writing using alphabets is much less than using a logogram. That is also in pages 106. Now I'm giving you just the page number because sometimes they would have even more details and maybe even more examples of these pages, of these elements. So advantages, you find it in page 106 if you want to take a look at it and to see if there's any, any other examples there. Now, social literacy. Now, since alphabets, they're very easy to learn. Everyone now does have, they can learn the alphabet and so on. Adoption facilities, again, something like government, economy, administrative work, they facilitate the widespread literacy, and now it's again a more democratic form of literacy. Remember when we said that words keep changing throughout the year? So we have two things. We have one that is called social literacy, and then we have another one called craft literacy. Now, just telling you a little bit of story, like a background. Craft literacy is basically people who are really good at crafts. Someone who is really good at painting, at drawing, which was really useful in their writing culture. Any craft, basically, making pots, making woodwork, designing, basically any craft, like again, painting or woodwork, carving, making furniture out of wood, and so on. So a craft literacy, it was forced in societies dependent on different kinds of writing. But then later on, when people started to have social literacy is basically, again, administrative work, writing letters, writing history, recording, stating something. Now, social literacy became a little bit more complicated and a little bit more advanced and even a little bit more needed than the craft literacy. So you see here, it's now a more democratic form of literacy, which is social literacy, than the craft literacy. And we'll get to know what does it mean to social literacy to become more democratic. Now, social literacy refers to a condition which the majority of people in a society possess literacy, means that they are able to read and write. Now, think about when you are actually able to read and write. You are actually able to create your own opinions about things. Now, imagine I ask you just orally, guys, I need you to criticize my class, versus you guys reading all maybe the guidelines, reading all the material, and giving you an actual pen and paper for you to write all of your critical opinion. When you are able to read and write, it's more easier for you to be able to, again, you have social literacy, you are able to be more critical. So again, social literacy is when you actually are able to read and write and to be critical and opinionated about some of them. Craft literacy refers to the arts. There's different kinds of art, but for our sake of our class, we're only focusing on the arts of reading and writing, such as storytellers or story writers that was not diffused through society, but in the hands of a few skilled craftsmen. So only few people do have the craft literacy, but then social literacy was very easy and accessible to everyone else because simply they are able to read and write. This part may be a little bit complicated, so I want to make sure that we understand the difference between social literacy and craft literacy. Does anyone? Now, critical thinking. Now, I want you to, again, let's say, again, I want you to put yourself in a position that there is no screen. I'm not sharing the screen, and I'm only explaining things orally. Do you think this would be easy, or when I'm actually sharing stuff with you, sharing writing with you, which would tend to stick more in your brain, if I'm just talking and talking and talking for hours, or when I am adding some words and some element and some speech to it? Which would make it easier for you? It said, now when you're just talking, we have to stimulate our brain even more to imagine what she's talking about. So now your brain is doing a lot of work, that you are listening, you're focusing, and you're also imagining the material. So that's actually a lot of work for your brain. But when one of them, you only need to just receive information, and you have some, some material in front of you, your brain tends to focus only on one point, which is just listening and interpreting, rather than make it so much difficult that your brain is multitasking, basically. Does that make sense? When your brain is multitasking, of course, it makes it easier to get a lot of information. So again, so pretty much all of you said, now you think that reading or looking at something, it makes it most of the time easier than just listening, or using both of your senses is better than using just one sense. Now imagine back in oral cultures, when people, again, in oral cultures, there was no writing, so people had to, remember when we said back in oral culture, people were repeating things over and over and over and over again? They just had to repeat it. It was so difficult. They had to just go over some of the music, or use repetition, or use poetry to make this information stick to your mind. So it was actually a lot of brain power to be able to use this. Now writing made things so much easier. Here, right now, writing lends itself to what we call abstract reasoning, critical thinking, empiricism. Now, what is empiricism? It's basically knowledge through observation in the world. Now, you observe things, you experience things, and you have your own thoughts and opinion about it. Now, when you have writing, writing basically puts logically connected ideas into what we call an external medium outside of our bodies, right? This means we can write something down, and it has a life of its own outside of our thinking, all right? Now, our thinking about what's written down encourages us to, again, to think about other ideas than what is separate from people. Now, again, imagine yourselves back in the oral culture. In an oral culture, again, let's say your only teacher in the oral culture. Again, you don't have any elements, all right? You don't have a book, you don't have a pen, you don't have a paper. Basically, what will happen is that I'm gonna try to influence you with my own ideas, right? So oral culture did not give the impact of people to develop their own thoughts or to develop their own critical thinking, because I am just injecting my ideas over to you. But with writing, you can just pause, go back, read it again, and you are developing your own ideas. So again, our thinking about what's written down encourages us to think about other ideas that it's not influenced by specifically other people. Now, some advantages of writing, of course, it keeps track of your own observation, like taking notes in your own classes, even gathering data in large quantities. Again, it's very easy for your, of course, it helps in gathering data in large quantities. There is a lot of, again, important development of empirical method, such as you guys understanding your own, again, putting your own material, putting your own thoughts and opinion. It encourages the development of skeptical thought, meaning that, again, when you are taking something from someone, it doesn't help you to really be skeptical and to think, rather than when you're reading something, it actually encourages you to ask questions. It's so easy because if anyone knows a writing system, information is going to be very accessible to anyone and to everyone. Now, again, another thing that we want to think about when coming to writing, it's, again, of course, critical thinking. Now, imagine if, again, I'm talking for 6 hours straight, okay? And the first hour I said something, and then by the last hour, I said the complete opposite. Would you be able to spot that I made a mistake? Could you be able to spot the mistake? that it actually might contribute in you not spotting these contradictions. But if I give you a sheet, let's say I give you my slides and you're studying it, and then you actually, in slide 1, there's something, and maybe in slide 6 or 7, there's something that is difficult. Do you think this would be easier to spot rather than just talking? And why do you think so? Would be a good one, because we know that we have a problem while collecting the information. So this is again, writing really helps in shaping your critical, not writing, sorry, reading really shapes and in understanding your critical thinking. And when you do spot a contradiction, it does encourage the resolution. Like you're going to send me in your hand, I found out a little problem in your slides. Maybe there's a mistake or there's something that did not make sense. You can take as much time as you want on the slides. Now again, imagine if I'm taking 6 hours to talk about a specific topic, and there is something that you don't really understand, but I'm still going on and talking. It's going to be easier for you. It's going to be, not very easy for you to stop and try to focus on one thing. But when you have the slides, when you have the readings, you can take however time you need. Maybe one slide you're going to take an hour because it really needs a lot of understanding. Maybe another slide is going to take 2 minutes because it was easy. So you are the one who is free to decide what time to allocate for which slide. So again, reading made things more smoother because again, things when they're in front of me, when they're in front of my eyes, it makes things a lot more smoother to understand. Now, the final thing, the rise of individuality. Now, we said earlier, writing puts logically connecting ideas into an external medium, which is a paper. Now again, imagine if you have a lot of things you want to say, but sometimes you feel a little bit lost. You feel like, okay, I have to write it down on the paper. This is actually what I do even when I'm working on my own lectures. I put it down in a paper, like when I'm preparing for my lecture, I put it down on a paper. And then I start putting all of the rational ideas and the opinions and the material and so on. So when I put it down in a paper and then I can, talk about them again, it simply makes things easier. Now, they put in an external medium, such as a paper, your tablet, your iPad, whatever. This means when we write something down, it has a life of its own, such as novels, such as books. A writer has wrote an idea in a book 200 years ago, and the book is still going on. People are still reading the book. So again, when I write something on the board or on our, on our sheet here, it's easy for you to go back and forth and for you to read it and to have your own thoughts. Rather than I ask you just a very broad question and then we all get into the discussion into it. Sometimes you feel like I need a few more minutes to actually think about it. Writing, again, is very supportive of societies that depend on organized collective efforts. Now, again, you are organized together. Someone is writing, someone is printing, someone is collecting information. So it makes things a lot easier. Now, they come together temporarily to collectively undertake tasks and depend more on, again, individual effort. And that's why from oral culture to writing culture, it starts to move from collectivism and it started to unpack and individuality starts to grow. Oral traditions play a significant role in cultural transmission, social coordination because they're very collective, and then because of reading and writing, people are starting to have their own individual ideas and they don't have to stay connected with their people or their people's opinions anymore. Now, go back to oral culture. Remember when we said that they have to be very interdependent on each other? And again, when a group is very interdependent on each other, it means that it's very difficult for the individuals in the group to have their own ideas, right? But when reading and writing started to develop, each and every single person had their own job or had their own skill. What happens is they come together temporarily to have different tasks to help together, but on the same time, each and every one of them has what we call an individual effort. So again, like collecting information, someone is going to write this information, someone is going to distribute this information into other people. And when everyone has their own individual tasks, they don't have to have, again, if let's say we are here, we're a village, me and you guys, we're like 42 people and we're here, we're a village. If we're very collective, means that sometimes even our ideas are going to be the same, because maybe let's say I'm the mayor of the village and I'm injecting you with my own ideas, with my own thoughts, rather than when we have writing, each and everyone is able to have their own thoughts, to have their own job, and to have their own task. So because of writing, it made it easier for individuals to create their own opinions, and therefore to be more individual, which is again back to collectivism and individualism. Basically, it made them more individual in their own ideas and their own opinions.